Welcome to our reInvent breakout session, the powerful simplicity of Amazon ECS. I'm Inbal Shani, General Manager for ECS Business. It goes without saying that AWS lives and breathes being customer obsessed. Not only it's one of our key leadership principles, but also how we think about decisions we make about our products and investments. We believe that's the right way to do it. And we hear it all the time from our customers, how we help make their lives easier. Now, before we dive into the talk and get into our vision, I want to have you hear a great story from one of our best customers, Instacart. And to do that, let me introduce Dustin Pierce, the Vice President of Infrastructure for Instacart, and he will share their cloud journey story and what they learned along the way. Dustin?
Thanks, Inbal. Thanks for having me today. Today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how Instacart uses Amazon ECS. My name's Dusty Pierce. I'm the VP of Infrastructure at Instacart. I joined there in January of 2020. I live in California, and previously I've worked at Slack and Life360 and Baby Center, all kind of AWS native systems. Just to familiarize yourself with Instacart if you're not familiar, Instacart is a grocery delivery platform where we want to create a world where everyone has access to the food they love and they have more time to enjoy it together. I think COVID has had a really traumatic impact on Instacart, and a lot of people really want to know more about what has happened at Instacart since that time I joined in January 2020. Well, what you can see is we've added 500,000 shoppers. We now have 55,000 locations in North America. If you took all the McDonald's and all the Starbucks in the United States, that would come up to 28,000. So it just gives you a sense of scale of how many stores are running through Instacart today. In a year, we've doubled the size of the company, the number of employees we've had, and now we have 1,000 plus engineers at Instacart. So growth has been vigorous at Instacart and has been a lot of fun. But today's talk is not so much about Instacart as a company, it's more about how do we use ECS as our primary compute platform. If you look back to the history of Instacart, as a startup, very young, very scrappy, just started on Heroku. And over time, over the years, as Instacart started to grow, we moved to VMs on EC2, but ultimately landed to containers being orchestrated on ECS. In around 2018 is when we launched our internal software, Instacart Service Control Plane, which is powered by ECS to give developers all the tools they need every day. If you look at some of the challenges that we face now at Instacart and the scale that we're facing, if you look in a year, we have around 800,000 commits, about 1.6 million kind of image builds to the registry, and then 4.6 million deploys to ECS every year. And so you can see that there are a lot of systems, there are a lot of developers, and the development activity is just as furious as the growth is at Instacart. Talking a little bit more about that control plane, around 2018, we decided to create an abstraction to kind of make the day-to-day lives of developers much easier. And a big part of the transformation at Instacart was, even prior to ISC, was the transformation from mutable infrastructure, namely VMs way back before ECS, to finally immutable infrastructure and deploying containers themselves on ECS. So ISC allows developers to do things like scale their services up, poison builds, deploy builds, roll them back, and we have a command line and a web-based interface. And this is what supports all of that deployment, all of that development that's going on constantly at Instacart. Taking a look at some of the things that this software had done, particularly when we moved to immutable infrastructure, was just look at the deploy times. If you looked at the deploy time for maybe an average cluster back in the day with about 40 nodes, it took about 20 minutes to deploy as you were downloading dependencies and updating this mutable VM over time. Now it takes just 5 minutes to deploy all 40 nodes. What the nice thing about fast deploy times is it reduces your iteration time. It makes it much easier to make smaller increments. And a good friend of mine, Nolan Caldwell, always talks about one of the highest leverage things you can do at a development team is small incremental product development. And so fast deploys is a big part of that. If you look at some of the others, you can see the advantage that comes with immutable infrastructure, using containers and deploying those to ECS. I think that the evidence is really in the data, and you can see how even over the course of 1 year, the amount of deploys and the frequency with which we deploy is now approaching 500,000 a month, which in my mind is just an outrageous number. And we're really excited about both our use of ECS so far. It has supported Instacart's growth through the pandemic. Our ability to invest in immutable infrastructure and containers has really allowed us to elastically scale to meet almost infinite demand and become critical infrastructure across the country in a really, really important time. And we continue to grow to this day. And really, I appreciate the partnership with the ECS team and with AWS. So that's a little quick overview of how Instacart uses ECS. Inbal, I'd like to turn it back to you now. Thanks.
Thank you, Dustin, for this inspiring story. And like what you just heard, customer feedback informs our guiding principles in how we build our products. What we hear from our customer is they want their teams to focus on delivering application as rapidly as possible. They want their infrastructure to be customized to their needs. They want scaling to whatever they need, and they want it quickly. They want security and isolation to control the access and permissions. The customer feedback helps form our path forward, and our view is that our customer moving to a control and repeatable environments and embracing automation, we see delivery velocity of product dramatically increasing, while improving operational efficiency and reduce the risk. Now, this feedback has driven our investment starting in 2014, when we launched the world's first container services, Amazon ECS. In 2016 and 2017, we released AWS Batch, a fully managed batch processing service, and Fargate, serverless compute for containers, including ECS. We didn't stop there, and in 2019, we launched Capacity Provider to manage the infrastructure for tasks in clusters. We launched Fargate Spot to run interruption tolerant for ECS tasks at up to 70% discount of the price. We also launched Containers Insight to collect and summarize metrics and logs from your containers application and microservices. And last year, we launched EFS, a simple serverless elastic file system on Graviton, which delivers the best price performance for your cloud infrastructure running on EC2. What we took is also one step further, and we launched Copilot, which make it easier to deploy application on ECS. Now, this year so far, and this year isn't over, we have launched ECS Anywhere, which allows customers to leverage ECS in both on-premise and cloud environment. We also launched ECS Exec, a feature that allows users to run interactive shell on a single command against a container, and AWS App Runner, a fully managed service that makes it easy for developer to quickly develop containerized web application and APIs at scale. And if there's one theme of all these features, is we take over more management overhead from our customers so they can focus on running applications. ECS forms the building blocks for various services at Amazon, both at AWS and Amazon CDO services. Some examples are Amazon Redshift, SageMaker, and Amazon.com recommendation. And this list goes on. Now, why do customers choose ECS? Primarily because the ease of use. They can simply go faster. They get to production fast, as the fully managed control plane allows more resources for application. There's also turnkey integration with all common AWS services, such as IAM, Load Balancer, Security Group, ECR, and CloudWatch. ECS is also proven at scale, performance, and security. And best of all is the total cost of ownership and no management. ECS is free. You only pay for the underlying resources used. And there is no control plane management overhead. It's fully managed by ECS, not like other solutions that exist out there in the market. Now, with that in mind, I'd like to invite Deepak Kalakuri, who leads ECS product management team, to take you one step deeper into ECS.
Thank you, Inbal. Let me take the opportunity to dive deeper into some of the details of the 3 areas of differentiation that Inbal referred to. Faster time to market, as you've seen at Instacart and other companies, is critical for customers to compete with their competitors out there. These days, every company is a software company. Either they're running software that they need to depend on for their business, or they're building software for their customers. And very often, it's a combination of these two. When we talk about fully managed, the benefit of that is clearly a much faster time to market. Faster time to market is a huge differentiator for our customers' businesses because they can innovate faster than their competition. The fully managed container service from ECS allows for end-to-end automation and for the least operational overhead. Essentially, it's just no ops, just apps. We invest many engineering hours across multiple teams to make ECS highly performant, reliable, and complete with SLAs for availability. ECS is available across many regions across the world because it is a region blocking service for Amazon, including China and MVP regions. This year, as we talked to customers, we realized customers wanted more. They wanted to innovate faster, they wanted to deploy faster, because that was becoming a critical part of how they stay ahead. We wanted to double down on that and deliver an even faster experience for customers for their ECS services and tasks when they launch them. One of the ways to do that was essentially increasing the task launch rate. Going into 2021, we wanted to make performance a differentiator for ECS rather than a nice to have. We did a lot of work across multiple teams this year to launch tasks faster for customers, up to 20 times faster. Throughout the year, you would have seen a lot of improvement for your ECS services and tasks. With this and other improvements that we have planned for ECS, a large high-tech customer who was taking about 99 minutes to run about 500 tasks in a service with ECS now takes only 16 minutes. Another fast-growing company, a high-tech company whose deployments of 100 tasks were taking about 320 seconds, with the improvements we made for them and to all customers, are now able to deploy within 90 seconds. Their development teams were delighted to see these improvements and the agility they got from this. One of Aerobotics, a growing South African agricultural tech company, is that their challenge was running Kubernetes meant the team had to manage the underlying EC2 infrastructure, which was not often optimized for costs. They found it difficult to keep the utilization of the underlying EC2 instances over 50%, which meant every month 50% of their costs was just for nothing. They needed a sustainable solution for processing architecture, negligible overhead, and low infrastructure costs. And the serverless compute offering that Amazon had fit that bill quite well. They also needed a solution that optimized both for infrastructure costs and the operational costs of maintaining and upkeeping a container orchestrator. They looked around within the Amazon ecosystem and they found step functions integrated with ECS on Fargate as the perfect match. With step functions, which is event-driven and a workflow-based system, calling into ECS on Fargate, a serverless compute orchestrator, as you've already seen, ECS itself is a no operations sort of model without any applications that you need to unpatch and upgrade every 3 months. With ECS on Fargate integrated with step functions, Aerobotics saw a 10x improvement in their overhead for management. A second key factor for giving customers faster time to market is enabling them to easily onboard onto ECS and helping them deploy container applications. We've made a lot of improvements this year in the console, and the simplified form now takes fewer clicks and you have a faster time to getting your application up and running. This reduced the form completion times, making it easier for container customers who are new to containers to adopt ECS and containers overall. We also launched 2 weeks ago the capability to generate task definitions for Amazon distro for OpenTelemetry for traces. And with this, with one click, customers can now deploy Amazon OpenTelemetry distro, ADOT, into their applications for collecting traces. Faster time to market is how developers make deployments. Let me talk about a roadmap item that we have here to tell you our vision for this area. We worked backwards from many customers' asks and recognized there were three key aspects that they cared about. One, they wanted advanced deployment strategies such as Blue, Green, and Canary out of the box without them having to construct their own tooling either on CodeDeploy or other tools that they used. They wanted better observability and troubleshooting capabilities. They wanted to know at what stage each deployment was as it was going through that. And third, they wanted to reduce costs of making deployments. Many a time, customers have to balance how quickly the infrastructure scales with how fast the deployment needs to be completed in. And balancing these can often be very challenging. To give you a sneak peek into how we are thinking about our own native deployments, ECS is working on a native deployments capability with out-of-the-box deployment strategies for Canary and Blue, Green. Over time, we would remove the need for having load balancers for traffic shifting. At launch, we'll have observability into the deployment stages that you can use this information for to further fine-tune your applications. We will give you safe deployments out of the box with automated rollbacks built in based on triggers or events that you configure. As we spoke at many of our large customer events and ISVs, we realized that we consistently were hearing something very specific. Most of our customers have a lot of running infrastructure on premises as well as in the cloud, and maintaining these two disparate tools chains was a problem. Our customers may have a specific reason to do that. Sometimes there's compliance needs. Sometimes it's just investments that they made in infrastructure that they need to carry on. There are four key challenges that customers face when they try to do this. One, they have to manage two different tool sets, which can be a challenge and time consuming, not to mention the skill that their employees have to onboard with. Secondly, it's just the existing CapEx investments that they've made that they're not able to realize benefit from, and they need to retire. And finally, there is the configuration, compliance, or regulatory compliance that they have to adhere to and keep the data locally. Take the example of a startup, a grocery startup out of Turkey, which operates globally. They need to maintain their customers' financial information and data within each region locally. That meant they'd have to manage different tools, one in the on-prem data centers and one in the cloud. We listened to all of these customers. And in May this year, ECS launched ECS Anywhere. ECS Anywhere gives customers one standard way to deploy containers both in the cloud and on premises. Customers can leverage the same existing APIs and the ECS knowledge they have to deploy containers across both locations. This removes the whole complexity for customers where they don't have to look at managing something like a Mesos or a Kubernetes cluster on premises just for their on-prem environments. Since May, we followed up with more features. We launched GPU support for external instances for GPU at the edge. This unblocks and opens up a whole lot of new applications, machine learning, data processing applications at the edge. And this is an area where we see very early good promise, and we hope to continue to build on this. Finally, ECS Anywhere is very resource minimally intensive. This makes it great for vertical applications. Customers who need to run in restaurants or other industries such as automotive can now run ECS Anywhere with just a very lightweight agent, essentially. Let me talk about a customer example. 3DI is one such company that operates out of Toronto. 3DI builds a video surveillance platform which allows cameras of different architecture and software to easily connect into their platform, making it easier for their own customers to use their platform. The challenge they had was that the software, while it allowed other customers infrastructure and software to be connected needed to run in third-party data centers to easily scale. And the availability of skill and talent in those third-party data centers was a constant problem. They needed one solution that worked for them in the cloud and in these various third-party data centers. They chose ECS Anywhere. With ECS Anywhere, they have one consistent toolset and one simple to use Amazon API-based toolset to work with. If you know AWS, you know ECS. Through all of this solution, they realized a 10x improvement in their operational overhead and costs, and they're able to scale faster. Many customers new to containers have to navigate a lot of choices in the open source ecosystem before they can figure out which container orchestrator they can use. Even after they've made a decision to use a particular container orchestrator, especially in an open source based system, you have a lot of choices for the rest of the tool set that you want to build your DevOps platform on top of. You have tools such as logging, metrics collection, or CI/CD, and each of these provides a lot of choices even within those. That's a lot of complexity. It leads to decision fatigue, and it actually is a lot of work. Our philosophy at ECS is to help customers choose less and actually feel good about it. That's the philosophy that drives ECS and the turnkey integrations philosophy that we have. There are two key challenges with open source based orchestrators. On one end, you have to make a whole lot of decisions, as I talked about which tool you're going to pick up for your particular job when the DevOps team looks at all of that tool set. Second, you have to buy into the whole philosophy of the ecosystem and blend in, and that is how you have to deploy any open source based orchestration. I was recently talking to one of our large customers, a technology company in the Bay Area, who sets up their own DevOps platform for their internal business units. And the reason they chose ECS was that they could build a platform that they wanted, custom suited for their customers internally, on top of ECS, where ECS was the foundation for them. And they love the flexibility that ECS offers, where they could pick and choose which tools they wanted to build on top of and integrate with. With ECS, they're able to innovate faster while keeping their flexibility open. ECS also makes this easier by giving first-class integrations with other AWS services, like Amazon ECR, the container registry, code deploy, application autoscaling, KMS, or IAM tools. There are built-in integrations from ECS into CloudWatch for traces, metrics, etc., and that makes it dead simple. We don't stop there. We want to give customers choice, as I mentioned. We extensively innovate along with partners and integrate into their products, but we're very careful. We integrate with the leaders out there in their businesses, such as Datadog, HashiCorp, Aqua Security, Harness, etc. Talking about partners and how we integrate, there's an entire integrated ecosystem that powers ECS. On one end, you have the power of ECS, that is the power of Amazon that ECS can benefit from. There's the whole Amazon ECR, BottleRocket innovations that we do, systems manager integrations that we have, IAM roles, etc. Everything feeds and adds to the capability that ECS brings. On the other hand, we also carefully select and groom our partners that we want to integrate with. You can look at that as three different buckets. From a platform or an ecosystem standpoint, we integrate with Docker and Git so customers can build their CI/CD and DevOps tools. A second category that we integrate with is the metrics and monitoring partners. Take Splunk, Datadog, Prometheus, etc. We also integrate with HashiCorp on the templating and the ecosystem side. And finally, there is the whole security set of partners that we integrate with. Take Aqua Security, Armory, etc., and Sysdig. We will continue to build out those integrations for the most popular tools out there, so you don't have to worry about maintaining and managing multiple tool sets. If you want an AWS opinionated solution, you have one. If you want a little bit of flexibility to tweak and use your favorite tool, you got that too. Let me talk about a roadmap feature that I'm very excited about, something that we have plans for in the near future. We want to reimagine the whole networking business at ECS. Customers today use ECS to build modern distributed applications, and that consists of a large number of services that they build and that they need to communicate with each other. Today, to ensure these applications are resilient and can perform when there's a loss of network, customers would have to manage some custom tooling to build on top of the service discovery that ECS has today. As we looked at this, we wanted to make this simpler. Customers care about networking and how their services communicate, not whether it uses a particular mesh technology or not. So we've taken that to heart, and to address these challenges, we are embarking on a journey to help customers reinvent how networking can be done for services. We imagine a world where service discovery and routing is out of the box, provided with a single click with ECS. This reduces the steep learning curve that service meshes or other technologies have out there, and helps customers securely connect, troubleshoot, and deploy highly resilient applications from a networking standpoint. We plan to further build on this and leverage the advanced traffic shifting mechanisms and feed that into our deployments project that I talked about, thereby removing the need for load balancers when you have to worry about deployments. Overall, they add to each other's value, and customers benefit from a much better networking and a deployment story together. That is our vision for delivering a seamless networking story for ECS-driven microservices that customers deploy. I talked about application first being a model for how we think about our own innovation from a feature standpoint. We want customers to focus on the higher end of the stack rather than the infrastructure components. As we thought about it, there are two ways we enable customers to do that. One, we have a rich set of CDK extensions for ECS. The CDK extensions allow customers and developers to program in their own favorite language for the infrastructure as code aspect that they want to maintain. And this helps them move to a complete infrastructure as code model without giving up on complexity. And we'll keep adding more to that as we develop features. We'll develop higher level abstractions to the CDK, and you should count on us to keep innovating there. The second thing I'd like to call out is the AWS Copilot CLI that we've launched. And this speaks to the application level abstractions I wanted to call out. Inbal talked about how we launched Copilot this year, and it has good traction already from customers, especially those small development teams within large companies or smaller companies love Copilot because it gives them an easy to get started way for abstractions that they can deploy applications with. They get an out-of-the-box pipeline, a CI/CD pipeline set up for them, ability to monitor and troubleshoot from the CLI without having to worry about setting up CloudFormation stacks under the hood, all with the power of ECS Fargate. That is what customers get. They can take a Docker Compose file, a single manifest file, punch it in, and then you have an application production ready running on ECS Fargate within 3 steps. Let me now talk about the third differentiation that Inbal called out, being enterprise grade. What does that really mean? I think there are 3 things about an application or a product or a service being enterprise grade. 1, it needs to be secure. 2, it needs to scale well without costing too much. And 3, it needs to scale well. So let me talk about the security element. ECS is enterprise ready. The benefit of ECS is that it builds on top of the AWS platform of infrastructure, which is already certified and will continue to get certified for new and upcoming regulations. So it really makes it easy for customers to take Amazon EC2 infrastructure and then just use ECS because it just adds to that capability from a certification standpoint. Makes that whole process easier. I was talking to one of our customers. They want us to do more here. They want us to integrate natively with security services that other security services that Amazon offers, because it really makes it easy for them to show to their own regulators that they're just compliant, and it takes fewer clicks, so to speak, for them. The second element of being ready from a security standpoint is least access. If you've played with ECS, you know that it takes less than 5 clicks to set something up because we are deeply integrated into the IAM roles, into the key management system, into the encryption systems at AWS. This is often not the case if you have to choose an open source tool because you need to build an integration that is not native. Finally, Fargate, essentially ECS on Fargate, has default task isolation boundaries across storage, networking, and compute. And that protects customers' tasks because nothing is shared. Each task is its own isolation boundary. There you go. All the way from bottom of the stack to the task and the service, everything is isolated and least access that you can give to your customers. The second element of being enterprise ready, as I mentioned, is your ability to scale, but at the same time manage your costs. So let me talk about what we have in the product today. ECS capacity providers, if you haven't taken a look, is a fast-growing aspect of the ECS product or service, which helps customers scale their instances and tasks and services in response to demand from or incoming traffic. Businesses often need to respond to customer demands, such as flash sales or premeditated sales, start of a business day for a financial company. And responding to these events often means that they have to stand up infrastructure much ahead of time and pay for that infrastructure when it's not needed. There are many things that we're looking to do here, but let me start with what we have. When you look at what Fargate offers rapid spin-up serverless compute, and it eliminates a lot of overhead that customers have. With Army upgrade management, scaling is easier, utilization is much better, you save on an infrastructure cost overall. And the best part is Fargate has an offering called Fargate Spot, which reduces your cost of infrastructure, leading to a better total cost of ownership. Fargate Spot is typically about 50 to 70% cheaper than the Fargate On Demand. So how do you take all of this goodness that Fargate has or EC2 offers and combine it with faster order scaling? And that's really where capacity providers come in. Capacity providers can listen to signal that you dedicate, something that tells your application that it's getting more traffic. It could be your CPU usage as an example. And taking that signal, it can scale up the number of tasks, figure out how many tasks are required for your service to support that traffic, and then scale the instances underneath as needed. Through this, capacity providers scale when you need to, when your application needs to, and you can save infrastructure costs without having to do much. It's integrated and out of the box. So now when you combine Fargate with capacity providers, you have a great combination. You can set up your application to run for your usual workloads with Fargate On Demand. And when you really need to burst up, you can use Fargate Spot, and the capacity providers can manage across both Fargate Demand and Fargate Spot. If you choose to run EC2 for some of your workloads, for whatever benefits EC2 offers, probably it's larger task sizes that Fargate doesn't support yet, you can still use capacity providers and just point your cluster to EC2 capacity, and everything else works more or less the same. I would urge you to take a look at capacity providers for your scaling needs. All right, I've been talking about roadmap in the last 2 sections. So the third section, why would I drop that? Here's something to get you excited. A lot of our customers are trying to balance, as I mentioned, scaling and costs. They need availability, but want to maintain lower costs. And sometimes it's a hard choice, but not anymore. The good news is that you don't have to make that choice with Fargate Graviton. We recently announced support for Fargate Graviton 2, and that has a 40% price to performance benefit for customers. Isn't that great? The second thing that we're planning there is, on the roadmap, we have larger task sizes. Today, we don't have support for 8 and 16 vCPUs on ECS Fargate. In the near future, we'll have support for 8 and 16 vCPUs with associated memory up to 120 GB. What that gives you is the ability to now launch larger tasks on ECS Fargate. Finally, we understand there's a whole set of machine learning and data processing applications that need GPU architectures. We also have Fargate GPU support on our roadmap for next year, and we'll talk about that. With all of these improvements we're making, there's no good reason to run applications on your legacy EC2. It's time to containerize and do that with ECS Fargate. We do all of this at an unprecedented scale. We launch on an average about 1 billion tasks or containers per week, and that was about 9 months ago. So it's billions at this point, as I understand from my engineering. It's about 3,000 tasks or containers per second. That's quite a bit. And for those of you who are developers out there, you probably know how difficult it is or how challenging the architecture could be if you need to serve tens of thousands of API requests every second. ECS does this. ECS is the largest container orchestrator on the planet. And that's because it's one multi-tenant orchestrator across all of the customers. ECS cluster is just a logical boundary. And finally, ECS is available in 19 AWS regions, 6 continents across the globe. So if there's an Amazon data center near you, there's ECS in there. Thank you for attending or listening to this session. We're eager to talk to you about your container application needs and use cases. Meanwhile, you can go to ecsworkshop.com to see a demo or register and deploy a sample application. You will see how easy it is to get started with containers with ECS.